Spain, Portugal on one side, France on the other, ocean everywhere else. Simple, right? Closed case. Clean borders. Now zoom in. Spain has cities in Africa. A Spanish town sitting inside France. A British rock, literally attached to its mainland. A medieval microstate that somehow never disappeared. And I genuinely need you to stay for this one. An island that legally changes ownership every 6 months. None of this is a mistake. And somehow, all of it is still real. Here's the thing about Spain's borders. Most people look at a map and assume borders are just lines. Two countries decided where one ends and the other starts. Someone drew it. Done. But Spain's borders weren't designed. They were accumulated over about 700 years from wars, treaties, colonial leftovers, one very specific argument about grammar, and at least one diplomatic island that apparently operates on a rotating schedule. Each one of these border anomalies is weird in a completely different way, which is the thing that makes Spain's map so good. It's not one accident, it's like 6 completely separate accidents that all happen to land on the same country. So here's what we're doing today. We're zooming in on 6 places where Spain's borders stopped making sense, and figuring out why they're still there. Because history, it turns out, does not clean up after itself. Let's start with the one that physically broke my brain the first time I saw it on a map. Ceuta. Ceuta is a Spanish city. It has Spanish streets, Spanish bureaucracy, Spanish tapas bars. All of it. It had a population of over 85,000 people as of early 2025. It is, by every legal measure, part of Spain. It is also in Africa. Not near Africa, not close to Africa. Ceuta sits directly on the North African coast, physically attached to Morocco, with Spain's U-linked border running right there on land against a neighboring African country. How does this happen? Portugal conquered Ceuta in 1415. Then later, through a long chain of dynastic events that only medieval history can produce, Ceuta stayed with Spain when Portugal got its independence back. The Treaty of Lisbon in 1668 made it official. Ceuta is Spanish, and it has been Spanish ever since, for over 350 years. The visual here is kind of beautiful and kind of absurd at the same time. You got southern Spain, then the Strait of Gibraltar, then you cross to North Africa, and sitting right there, surrounded by Morocco, is a city where you can get a Spanish passport renewed. But here's the thing. Ceuta isn't just a geography fun fact. In May 2021, over 9,000 people crossed into Ceuta from Morocco in roughly 2 days. Around 1,500 of them were minors. This is an external border, happening on the African continent. And that tension, that gap between the map and the reality of the place is something that matters. It's not just trivia. And then there's Melilla. Melilla is the second Spanish city on the North African coast. About 88,000 people, also autonomous, also in Morocco's geographic backyard. Melilla's history goes back to 1497, the Vapol 29-7, Castilian occupation. It spent centuries as a military fortress, and it looks like one. Old stone walls, fortifications, the whole thing. It's genuinely dramatic. But here's the contrast that gets me. That same medieval fortress is now home to one of the most technically sophisticated border defenses in Europe. Cameras, patrol roads, barriers, a hyper-modern external U-checkpoint grafted directly onto a centuries-old citadel, medieval architecture, modern border security, on a city the size of a small English market town, sitting in Morocco. And in June 2022, around 2,000 people attempted to enter Melilla by climbing the border fence. Experts said at least 23 people died. European institutions and Spain's own ombudsman called for investigation. So, when we talk about Ceuta and Melilla being weird borders, yes, they're fascinating from a history and maps perspective, but they're also places where real things happen to real people. That's worth holding on to as we go through this. Okay, so far we've got 2 Spanish cities in Africa that exist because of medieval conquest and have survived into the 21st century as external border pressure points. That's a lot. But here's where the border weirdness shifts completely. Because the next ones aren't about migration or politics. They're about the specific, almost comedic ways that old treaties created impossible situations that nobody ever bothered to fix. And honestly, they're even weirder. Starting with a town that stayed Spanish because of one word. In 1659, the Treaty of the Pyrenees ended a war between Spain and France. As part of the deal, Spain agreed to hand over several villages in the Cerdagne region to France. The treaty said, villages, not towns, villages. Llívia was legally classified as a villa, a town, not a village, and so, technically, it wasn't covered by the treaty. Spain kept it. And today, Llívia is a completely ordinary Spanish municipality, about 1,700 people, roughly 12 square kilometers, sitting completely surrounded by French territory. You have to drive through France to get there. From Spain, it's a Spanish island inside France. Created not by war, not by any grand imperial decision. Created because a diplomat used the word villages, and someone in Llívia read that very carefully. The situation got complicated enough that in 1866, a whole separate treaty had to be signed. The Bayonne Boundary Treaty, just to sort out the practical details of how people were actually supposed to move between Llívia and the rest of Spain through French territory. And then, in the 1970s and 80s, there was apparently a genuine local conflict over French stop signs on the connecting road. Spanish residents argued that the road's special status meant the signs didn't apply to them. This became known, and I'm not making this up, as the War of the Stop Signs, a border anomaly, held together by one treaty word, and then nearly undone by traffic furniture. Europe is something else. Then, there's Gibraltar. You probably know this one. A British territory. A rock. Technically attached to southern Spain. Still deeply disputed after over 300 years. Here's the legal moment that created it. Article X of the Treaty of Utrecht, 1713. Spain ceded Gibraltar, the town, the castle, the port, the fortifications, to Breton, Dawn, signed. Except Spain has never fully accepted what that cession actually included. The exact boundaries of what was ceded, especially the narrow isthmus connecting Gibraltar to the Spanish mainland, has been disputed basically ever since. The result, a piece of British territory bolted onto southern Spain, with a border that about 15,000 people cross every single day for work. Gibraltar's economy depends on that flow. Spain's nearby region depends on that flow. The politics around it have never fully resolved. And the most visually unhinged part of all of this? The airport. Gibraltar's airport runway crosses the main road into town. There is a road that runs across an active airport runway. You stop at a barrier, a plane lands or takes off, the barrier goes up, you drive across the tarmac. This is real. This happens every day. It's like someone designed a border checkpoint by asking, what's the most chaotic possible arrangement? As of February 2026, the UK, Gibraltar, the EU, and Spain had published a draft agreement on Gibraltar's future relationship with Europe. But it's still going through legal review. The dispute isn't over, because when a treaty clause survives longer than the empire that wrote it, things tend to get complicated. Now, Andorra is not technically a Spanish border anomaly. It's a fully independent country, but it sits right in the middle of the Spain-France-Pyrenees border, and its existence is too strange to skip. Andorra comes from something called the Peerages, medieval agreements from 1278 and 1288 that established a shared lordship over the territory. That arrangement, from the 1200s, evolved, and today Andorra is a modern parliamentary democracy, a member of the UN, with its own government and constitution adopted in 1993. But here's the detail that I love. Andorra has two heads of state, called co-princes. They're the Bishop of Urgell, based in Spain, and the President of France. The elected President of France is simultaneously a head of state of another country. Emmanuel Macron has technically been a ruling monarch, by virtue of winning a French election. A medieval feudal compromise from the 13th century is still structurally embedded in a modern democracy, because it never broke, so nobody ever fixed it. Andorra is proof that if something survives long enough, eventually, it just becomes normal. And then, Pheasant Island. Pheasant Island sits in the Bidasoa River, right on the Spain-France border, between the towns of Irún and Hendaye. It's tiny, uninhabited, no buildings, no economy, just a small wooded island in a river. And legally, it is administered by Spain from February to July, and by France from August to January. The border does not move. The island does not move. The sovereignty moves twice a year because of the calendar. This arrangement traces back to the Treaty of the Pyrenees, 1659, Same treaty that created the Llívia situation. The island was used as a neutral diplomatic meeting ground between the Spanish and French monarchies. It became a condominium, jointly owned, rotating administration, and that has continued. Into the 21st century, a tiny, uninhabited island changes hands every 6 months because a 17th century treaty said so, and nobody has felt the need to change it. No war, no political crisis, no dramatic border dispute, just it's February, so it's Spain's turn again. Some borders were drawn by empires, some were drawn by treaties. This one runs on a schedule. Here's the thing that gets me about all of this. Most countries, when you look at them on a map, have borders that feel designed. Like someone sat down and said, here's where we go, here's where you go. Spain's borders feel assembled, piece by piece, over 700 years. A medieval conquest here, a treaty word there, a British rock, a rotating island, a feudal microstate that just never stopped. None of these anomalies were meant to last this long, but they survived, because history doesn't erase itself, it just stays on the map. And every now and then, it becomes a border fence, or an airport runway, or a stop sign dispute, or a 6-month sovereignty handoff that nobody bothered to cancel. Spain's borders are weird because they're honest. They show exactly how they were made. The closer you zoom in on Europe, the less clean it gets, which honestly tracks. If this kind of stuff is your thing, borders, geography, maps that make no sense, I've got more of this coming. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and comment below which one of these was the most unhinged to you, because I genuinely need to know if we're all equally broken by Pheasant Island, or if it's just me. I'll see you in the next one.